Imagine if one day you suddenly can't talk properly like me. You can't communicate ideas at the workplace, and in doing so, you get shunned by your workmates or can't walk down a flight of stairs without help. These and more happened to Terence Ang. He suddenly collapsed at home after a stroke hit him, leaving him incapacitated. But after months of intense rehab therapy, love from workmates and family, and also sheer resilience, Terence's condition greatly improved, and he even wrote a book with illustrations about his journey so far.
Yeah, this book is called A Cry in the Dark. And while Terence himself will join us another time, let's speak to some of the people who helped him along this journey filled with laughter and tears. So we have with us Evelyn Khoo, a speech and language therapist and founder of Aphasia SG, and Toh Song Choon, head physiotherapist and co-founder of Exodus Physiotherapy. Hey, Song Choon and Evelyn, got to ask you this, right? Because Terence recalled a conversation in the book with rehab consultant Dr. Moses about the golden period of recovery. It's a time period when the brain can best repair itself 3 months after a stroke. But what's the best that can be done for them during that time, even if they don't have the strength to work on themselves? Maybe we can begin with you, Evelyn.
Yep. Hi, thanks so much for having us. So I think there's always this concept of a golden period after a stroke or brain injury. And that's when, the neurorehabilitation tends to be intensive. If they're still staying in the hospital and the wards, that's when the patient in the wards will also receive quite a fair amount of rehab. And we say that's when, the brain is most neuroplastic and trying to recover and repair itself. So we do recommend intensive rehab in all areas of needs, obviously. If the patient is having severe impairment after the brain injury, there are still things that can be done. And sometimes the rehab can seem passive, meaning you can have the therapist or family member doing it for the person, but it is still helpful.
Okay, Song Choon.
Yeah. Evelyn is right. In fact, I do want to say that it is not so much of 3 months after a stroke where the best recovery is. It is ASAP, as soon as possible. Once the patient is medically stable, we want to start the rehab as early as possible. And in that first 90 days, that's where the maximum recovery or the quickest recovery can happen. But of course, it's not just the end of the whole journey. Beyond that, even up to 6 months, there can be continuous recovery as well. And of course, in the hospital, usually we want to involve the family members, because even when physiotherapists, we can only work with the patient for maybe 30 minutes or maximum 45 minutes or so. But we do want, the patient to be working regularly throughout the day, because in a day there's 24 hours, we want to maximize their time. So a lot of times we encourage and we educate the caregivers some simple exercises that they can conduct with the patient to encourage more activity.
Yeah, it's a long road to recovery, but it's important to have support, not just when you're getting the physio treatment, but also when you leave the physiotherapy and you go back to your family members and close friends. This one's for the two of you, but maybe Song Choon, you can take it first. Terence couldn't articulate what he wanted during his first few therapy sessions, and he said he was buried alive by his own body. He was angry, humiliated, and hurt. How are stroke patients usually counseled during this very tough, emotional, very difficult time?
Right. In a hospital, usually we have a whole multidisciplinary team consisting of social workers, speech therapists, and sometimes even the psychologists are involved. And there are support, from all these different professionals to help people who are struggling with their articulation and with putting their words into speech. So there is quite good support, and even for other professions like physiotherapists, we tend to offer that listening ear even during the process of doing the exercises with them, and even occupational therapists does the same thing as well. Basically, we communicate, the whole team communicate with one another. We make sure that we send the right message across to the patient and to offer that help and that listening ear to them across board.
Lance, there is a page in the book where Terence went into some, it looked like he was going through some bad depression because he just couldn't move and he just couldn't do it. And he said he was descending into some sort of darkness. And you know what Song Choon did? He started dancing around saying tra-la-la, papa, and Terence drew a picture of him dancing.
Does it look like you, Song Choon?
I guess I have to say that yes, it does look a little bit like me. But yeah, I mean, I tend to...
you have to lift their spirits up, right?
Yeah, definitely. Because sometimes they are just so caught up in that state, of, feeling down. We just have to do things to cheer them up, to help them to realize that, life is going to continue on. They can have hope, even though they have, have so much struggles through all this. They can get better over time. So I try my best to do little things like that just to put a smile on their face.
And Evelyn, would you like to add on to that as well?
Yeah, I think Song Choon brought up a really good point about the multidisciplinary team, especially for complex stroke cases. But also, I think we need to talk about the importance of the support of family and friends. And they also feature very heavily in Terence's book, because I think family and friends being understanding and just being there, rallying around the patient is so important, making them feel, that, hey, it's going to be all right. So I think that is so important.
Yeah, and injecting humor also is so important too. Evelyn, you appear also in the book. You pop up in the speech chapter and you played word association games with Terence to improve brain agility. Can you give us some examples of this? As you know why? Because all patients communicate differently, right?
Absolutely, yeah. So every individual is different, as we know, but also the impairment that afflicts them can be different. Even though we could use a general term, a general diagnosis like aphasia, or we could say, they have apraxia of speech. But in fact, how it might manifest, especially if it's aphasia, can be so different for different people, different individuals. In Terence's case, he has word finding difficulty, which we term as like anomic aphasia, and he also had some memory difficulty, especially his working memory. He would find it really hard to remember verbal instructions sometimes. So we did a lot of games in the book. It was taboo that we were playing, but we also did other things like remembering word lists or coming up with like a memory game where we would play in a group and everybody had to come up with a different word associated to a certain context like supermarkets. And so really fun stuff. But for another patient, it could be entirely different where we are doing more listening activities. Yeah.
Well, Terence mentioned how the healthcare workers and therapists didn't treat him like just another patient, but were conscious of his specific likes and dislikes. And the Sengkang Community Hospital ward was also alive with a lot of energy as well as optimism. The question is, who looks after these healthcare workers who also need themselves encouragement, because sometimes the patient's sadness or blind anger may hurt them, and obviously it's not easy as well when you're trying to help someone and the person is getting a bit frustrated and you don't know how to proceed, so to speak.
I think there's a lot of peer support. Meaning, when fellow healthcare professionals meet, we always have a lot of things to talk about, and it helps to have a team to work with. So in that sense, if I'm facing let's say a difficult caregiver or a difficult patient, I would share it or just decompress by sharing it with some of my colleagues at work, and that helps. But also, I like to think that most healthcare professionals, most of us are resilient, and we don't blame patients for being difficult, because it is a difficult time they're going through, and we completely understand that when we go into this line.
And Song Choon, how would you add to that?
Yeah, similar to what Evelyn said, it is a lot of peer support, complaining to one another about some of the struggles, that we may face dealing with some of the patients. But more importantly, I think it's also actively trying to figure out how we can help them better, because sometimes on our own, we have our own blind spot. We might be missing something that, and as a result, we may tend to face some of the struggle. We tend to not be able to help the patient as effectively. So speaking to colleagues helps a ton in this whole process.
Yeah, and it's good to talk these things out like both of you have said. Well, Terence did offer some suggestions in pages 123 and 124 for more accessible rehab care in Singapore, although he says he has noticed improvements along his journey. What have patients and their caregivers been asking for as well while you are attending to these people? Song Choon.
Yeah, I think one of the most common requests is accessibility, having a place where it's near their home. Because I think once you have you suffer stroke, moving around can be quite inconvenient. So a lot of times they want a rehab location that is convenient for them, but it is not always possible because of limitations in the number of centers that we have around Singapore. The other common request is the frequency, because everyone wants their family members to get better faster, and there are people who request for daily rehab or at least three times a week rehab, which may not always be possible simply because of the amount of people requiring such services.
Yeah, because Terence did want more therapy and rehab sessions for himself, and he kept saying that a lot in the book. What about you, Evelyn? What have patients and their caregivers been telling you?
I echo what Song Choon said about frequency. So I think a lot of families and patients, that I talk to would share that they wish it was easier to actually get appointments and not have to wait like a month for a therapy appointment in the hospitals. Then another point that comes up with some patients is the accessibility to information, how they find that they have to navigate the system and, just go online. And of course, there are social workers that can help them, but sometimes if they need more in-depth information about community support and whatnot, not all social workers may know about the facilities and the information. So I guess, I think some families do wish for more of a one-stop shop information. Yeah.
Can we ask the two of you, we'll stay with you, Evelyn, which parts of the book, A Cry in the Dark, resonates with you the most, both professionally and personally?
I think as a professional, I have to say it's the speech chapter. Obviously, it's really fun, and I hope that anyone who reads it can understands that speech therapy can be really fun and not take it as a chore. But personally, I was also very moved by the chapter where Terence shared his first outing. That chapter really resonated with me about how sometimes we take things for granted until something bad happens, and then like little things, even just walking out and noticing the sunlight and all that, it's special, it's precious. Yeah.
And Song Choon?
Yeah, for me it's the drawings. Why? Because the drawings are all done by the hand that is affected by the stroke. I remember I think it was sometime last year where I started him on writing because he didn't no one practiced with him yet. So I encouraged him, I sat down in the clinic and asked him to start writing his name. And then it, slowly progressed to all the drawings that you see today. So I think that is something that encouraged me a lot, because I think the key message here is that with Terence, he doesn't know how to give up. He wants to keep trying his best, to keep trying over and over again. That is an important reminder for myself as well, to even when dealing with patients, to never give up on them, because sometimes there are patients who may want to give up on themselves. And I think as a professional, I'm reminded by Terence that, sometimes all we need is to have someone to believe in them, to push them, to encourage them. And that is the drawings, is the one that really resonate with me a lot.
Song Choon, keep dancing.
Yeah, that's right.
And
we want to see more of your dance moves and more drawings of you as well, Song Choon.
and Evelyn, keep going the good work that both of you are doing.
Yeah, because the two of you are like unsung heroes.
Yeah.
We only find out about people like you only very luckily through books like this, because some of you are doing so much and it goes unrecognized. So Mel and I are so happy you've come on the show and you've been able to share with us the journey of one patient of yours, Terence.
Yeah. Terence, and thank you to Terence for helping helping us make this possible as well. We've been honored to have you on Singapore Today, and like Lance said, you definitely too are definitely unsung heroes, and there's so many healthcare workers that surround us today.
Thank you so much for having us.
Oh, it was our pleasure. Trust us. Evelyn Khoo, a speech and language therapist and founder of Aphasia SG, and Toh Song Choon, head of physiotherapist and co-founder of Exodus Physiotherapy. A Cry in the Dark by Terence Ang is now available in stores as well as being able to buy it online.
Talk to us anytime. WhatsApp CNA938 on 963 11938.